Hi, welcome to the Urban Outdoorsman SoCal video. My name is Danny Milton. So while I was at the Texas TAC, I bought a bunch of new equipment for my bow, and what we're going to be talking about today is the UV slider, the SE, the special edition. I'm also going to be doing a comparison video between the UV slider and my previous slider sight on my bow before. I'm not going to be talking about a lot of the features on the UV slider in this video because we're just going to be doing the sight-in process on this and showing you guys how to do that. If you do want to see a lot of the features that I'm going to be talking about, you can go to that comparison video where I'll be talking about all of those things. If you want to just skip ahead to the actual sight-in process, I'll put a time code right here. You can just skip ahead to that. I'm just going to be talking about a couple of other setup things and some of the things that I do before I start shooting the sight. This is not the first UV XL like scope housing that I've had. When they first came out, I purchased one and I didn't like it so much. There were a couple problems with it, especially like the sight ring. You know, there was no scope ring on the back of it. I'll show you guys what this one looks like just really quickly on the screen here. Now they have little inserts and you can have different colored inserts. So that's basically when you're looking through your peep sight, you do actually have a ring in there that you can see really well. Whereas before there was just kind of like a white O-ring inside of the housing and you could barely see it. And that was one of my major complaints with this scope housing. So most archery slider sights are pretty much sighted in the same way. You put it on your bow, you figure out where your 20-yard pin is going to be. You use some type of scale where you line it up to your 20 pin and then you just kind of ease your way back to 60 yards. Most companies recommend 60 yards. One other thing I recommend is anytime you're trying to figure out like a yardage tape, not to shoot at like a circle target or just a dot. Basically what I have, as you can see right here in the background, is I have my target with just a thick white piece of tape across it. You know, you can use duct tape or anything like that. Something that's probably about an inch, maybe 1.5 inches, 2 inches wide. So when you're only shooting at that flat line, you don't have to worry about your windage. You don't have to worry about your bubble moving back and forth, right or left. Especially when you're out there at 60 or 80 yards plus, it's going to make a big difference when you're just aiming at that line and just putting your pin on that line. It's going to make a big difference. So another thing I'll mention really quickly too is when I mounted this sight on my bow, I leveled out the second and third axis. This particular sight, you don't have to do the first axis because it's actually kind of locked into place, so there's no variance as far as the first axis goes. So locked in those second and third axis, came out here and started doing the shooting and everything like that. Usually what I'll do is I'll do a paper tune before I even start shooting at the archery, just to make sure that everything's lined up, the rest is in the correct place. You know, if that rest is a little bit off as far as rights and lefts goes, it's not really going to, I wouldn't think it would affect your yardage too much, but if it's kicking your arrow up or kicking your arrow down, that might adjust, you know, that might affect your range. So I haven't done that paper tune yet, but this is just kind of like an initial thing. I'm probably going to do that in the next couple days, and if there are any variances in the yardage, I'll let you guys know. Getting that 20-yard pin exactly right is really important to this process. You want to be able to at least get all of your arrows inside that piece of tape, you know, if it's an inch, 1.5 inches. I mean, if you can get them all in a perfectly flat line right down the center of that tape, that's perfect. But if you have a little bit of variance, like an inch or so, it's not that big of a deal. But the closer you can get them to the center of that piece of tape, the better. When you first start shooting your arrows at that piece of tape, just so you know, you're always going to move, when you're making adjustments to your housing or your yardage, you basically just follow the arrow. So if you're shooting at that tape and we haven't really figured out where our 20-yard mark is, if your arrows are above the mark, you need to move your housing a little bit higher up the riser. If your arrows are below the mark or below the piece of tape, you need to move your arrow housing down. All right, that's much better. I'm maybe a 1/2 inch below the tape, probably about 1 inch and maybe 1/4 below the center line of that tape. So very good. So all I need to do now is just move my slider down. Just going to release and just clockwise makes it go down, counterclockwise makes it go up. Just going to lower a little bit, try that, see how it goes. All right, inside the line, maybe a little bit low. Try that again, same spot. Looks about the same height, so getting pretty close. You know, I definitely would do, once you think you're close, go back, reset, shoot another 10 or 15 arrows. You definitely want to make sure that that 20-yard pin is as dead center on that line as you could possibly get. All right, so this one right here, the one that's low, that was my first shot after moving the slider assembly up. Now, once we did that, these are my next 3 shots. You can see those are pretty stacked up right there. Still getting used to the sight, obviously, but those are pretty good. This one is pretty much dead center of that line. These two a little bit low, but that's just me kind of getting used to it. I didn't make any adjustments, so gonna just keep going and see if we can get them all in the middle. Pretty happy with the minimal adjustments I've made so far. Once we did that group of 3, I didn't change my elevation at all with the dial. Just have to kind of get used to using this sight and lining it up with the peep sight. All right, this is my second end right here. You can see I'm still having a little bit of variance. You know, this one on the far left was a little bit high, just touching the tape. This one is on the bottom edge of the tape, but inside. These two, this one and this one right here, are pretty much dead center. And then this one is just low. All right, so we're starting to get a little bit closer to dialed in here. I haven't changed anything on the elevation yet. Dead center, pretty much dead center, maybe 1/8 of an inch high. And this was my low shot. That was my bad shot. So getting pretty close to where I want that 20 to be, but I just want to show you guys an example real quick. Let's say you're not able to hit that tape at 20 yards every time. Let's say this is kind of what your arrow range looks like. You know, you got this one in the dead center on the tape, right? But then you got 2 high, and they're about, you know, maybe an inch and a quarter above the top of the tape. And maybe you got a couple that are low, maybe, you know, about an inch or so below that tape. Now, if that's the best you can do, and I would totally recommend that you want to try to get them all at least in that tape line. But if this is the best you can do, pretty much you can take the average. You know, you've got 1 high and 1 low here, and they're about the same distance from the center of that tape. You know, it could have just been a little anchor point. You might have been off on your face a little bit, or a little bit of pressure. But I would take that average, and I would say that would be pretty good if that's basically what your grouping is looking like at 20 yards. You can kind of take the average. You know, this one, like I said, this one's about the same height low as this one is, and this one over here too. So you might have made the same mistake both times on these 2 arrows, and they're about the same distance low, and these 2 arrows are about the same distance high. Then you got that one in the center, or even if you don't have one in the center, let's say you have one, you know, about right there. So you've got 3 high and 2 low. You can kind of take the average in that middle, and you're pretty close to that 20-yard spot. So that might be a good spot to start from for your 20-yard pin. You want to probably try to get most of those arrows in that tape line for the most accurate tape possible. So far, I'm pretty happy with the sight and the sighting process so far. So now that I've got my 20-yard pin all sighted in, what we're going to do is we're going to take our tapes. We're going to use our sight-in tape right here, and I'll show you guys some close-ups and how I put it on the slider itself. Basically, what we're going to do is we're just going to line that up with the 20-yard pin, and then we're going to ease out all the way out to 60 yards, you know, probably about 10 yards at a time, just so we don't, you know, miss a target or anything like that. I'll show you guys all this stuff as well. We're going to talk through it. I'm going to put that on there, figure out exactly which number correlates to the sight tapes on here. We're going to put the sight tape on, you know, the actual sight tape that shows all of the yardages, and see how well it works. All right, so this is the side of the slider that you put the sight-in tape on. You can see you have one little tiny pin right here. We're going to take off this screw, and that takes off this little metal piece right here that we're going to put the sticker of the sight tape on. So we're just going to take out these 2 screws, take off this little metal bar, and put the sight tape calculator, or, you know, kind of range thing on there. So use that little sticker, put that little sticker on the metal bar, screw it back on, and line up that pin with the top of the 20-yard marker that's on the actual tape itself. You know, put the screws down lightly, slide that little metal bar into position, and then tighten those screws down, and then we're just going to head out to the range and start shooting at 60. Okay, so now that we have that 20-yard pin set up, we have our sight tape on, we have our dial right here at 20 yards. Basically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move back 10 yards at a time, 30, 40, 50, then all the way out to 60. I don't want to guess about how far I have to move it down to go out to 60, because I don't want to miss a target. That's why I do the 10-yard increments. So basically what I'm doing, I'm just gonna take the dial and I'll try to show you guys really quickly on camera here. Hopefully that's in view, otherwise I'll show you a secondary shot. So we got our pin right here at 20. I'm just gonna move it down about 1/4 of an inch. Now I'm just gonna take a couple shots at 30 yards and see where I am. Hopefully I'm pretty close to that tape, or probably be maybe a little bit high. Maybe about 1.5 inches above the tape line. So I probably moved it down just a little bit too far. Take one more shot here. Yeah, both of those arrows are right next to each other. Probably about 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inches above the center of the tape. So we're pretty good right there. So we're gonna move back 10 more yards, move that tape down maybe a little less than 1/4 inch and see how we are. All right, so now I'm out to 40 yards. I'm gonna release our lock, move it down maybe like 3/16. I'll show you guys a close-up what it looks like on screen and how far I moved it. I'm just gonna take a couple shots at 40 yards here. Hopefully we're still pretty close to that tape line. It's okay if we're not. Might be a little bit high, maybe a little bit low, but not too much to where we're gonna miss the target. Yeah, perfect. Right on the line with that second shot. First shot was not a great one. Went about 4 inches high, but still on target, you know, on my target, so I don't have to worry about breaking an arrow. Second shot, much better, right on the line. So we're good. Let's move out to 50 and go from there. All right, so now we're at 50 yards. Gonna do the same exact thing. Just gonna move our wheel down about 1/4 of an inch or so, right about there, and shoot a couple arrows, see where we're at. That one was a little high. That's why I always like to shoot a couple. Like, we're not trying to hit that line. Just trying to make sure that we didn't move our sight housing too far up or too far down and miss our target. All right, I'm gonna go check those arrows. I might have moved it down a little bit too far. Still on target, but they were both pretty high. First one was about 4 inches high, the second one was about 6 inches high. All right, so I had moved my sight a little bit too far down on that 50-yard shot, and both shots were probably about 8 inches high. So moved it up maybe about 1/8 of an inch, and we'll take a couple more shots and see where we're at. Much better, right on the line. So if I'm looking at my calibration tape right now, 50 yards on my calibration tape right now is probably like around 4. That's the first time we've actually been in the numbers. Shoot one more just to make sure, because, you know, even a blind squirrel finds a nut. Yeah, maybe 1 inch above the tape. So that's a good mark for 50. We're going to move out to 60 yards, move it down about 1/4 of an inch or so, and see where that puts us. All right, out to 60 yards. Gonna move that wheel down about another 1/4 inch. I think that puts me right at 19 on the calibration tape. So let's see how those shoot. So right about 19 is gonna be our 60-yard marker on that calibration tape, but I'm probably gonna shoot another 50 to 100 arrows just to make sure. Might play with it a little bit up and down, maybe try out 20, maybe try 18, or maybe even 22, just to see which number I like the best. So now that I've been shooting the bow for a little bit, I really dialed in my calibration tape. I started off at a 19, but now I found that the number 20 was pretty much good for me at 60 yards. Hitting most of those arrows pretty close, if not in that tape line. Okay, so now that we know that our sight tape is gonna be number 20, what we're gonna do is we're gonna go back to the table and install our actual sight tape. So the first thing you wanna do is you wanna roll your scope housing back up to that 20 mark on your calibration tape. Next, what we're gonna do is we're gonna take the front of the scope housing off, and we're gonna set up our pins on the actual sight tape, because you have a top and a bottom. So now that you have that scope housing off, we're gonna line up the yellow pin on the 35-yard mark, and we're gonna put the top pin at 20 and the bottom pin at 50. You can also do 20, 30, 40 if you want to. So if you wanted to do that, you would put the yellow pin on a 30 and then adjust the top pin and the bottom pin to 20/40. But I want to have a little bit bigger range, so when I go hunting I can use this scope housing. So now that we have the top and the bottom pin set, the yellow pin is obviously fixed. We're going to put that back onto our scope housing. Now basically what we're going to do is we're going to take our sight tape, we're going to put it on the little metal strip, and we're going to put that onto the scope itself. So now that we have our sticker on the actual piece of metal, we're going to put that onto our scope. We're going to line up the 20-yard marker with that yellow pin, and once we have that set, we can tighten down the sight tape. So now that we have the sight tape on the scope housing and we've matched up the 20-yard mark on the sight tape to the yellow pin that's on the scope itself, we're going to tighten that down. So now that you have that sight tape installed, we're going to roll the housing down to either 30 or 35, the way you set up your pins on that tape itself. For me, I put it on 35, so I'm going to move that yellow pin down to 35. We're going to lock it in place, and now we're going to adjust the actual pins on the front there to that 20 and that 50-yard mark. Now that we have those pins all set up, they're going to match what we did to the pins on the inside of the scope housing, and we can go out onto the range and start testing and making sure all of those pins are lined up perfectly. Okay, so I'm really happy with the whole sight-in process using the UltraView so far. It's working really well for me. I've been shooting for about 45 minutes to an hour now once I had that sight tape on, checking out all the different yardages, using that center pin, the top pin, and the bottom pin. Use the center pin all the way out to about 100 yards. Really happy with the results. You know, I have a little bit of variance just because I'm still getting used to shooting with this sight. It's just a little bit different setup than my previous sight and just getting used to something new. Also did a bunch of shots using the top pin and the bottom pin. Checked those yardages out all the way out to about 75 yards and getting the same results, you know, very close to that center line, if not on that center line, using both the top and bottom pins. I'm really liking the ease of operation using this sight. You know, the lock is really great. The sight tape itself is very clear and easy to read. The pins on that sight tape, you know, pointed toward your yardages are very sharp and very easy to dial into the exact yardage. I'm going to be comparing the UltraView sight to my old sight, the Axel Landslide. That also had the Spot Hog scope housing on it. That's the sight I've been using for probably about a year and a half. Really like that one, but liking this one even a little bit more, so stay tuned for that video. And yeah, that's about it. I really appreciate you guys watching. If you have any questions or you're having any problems sighting in your particular sight, or even if you're using the UltraView one, leave those questions down in the comments. I usually get back to people within, you know, a day and a half, as long as it pops up on my phone. So do all that fun stuff for me, please. Smash that like button. Every time you guys hit that like button, this video gets out to more people, and YouTube, with all of its algorithms and stuff, will push it out to more people. Definitely share this video with any of your friends that are trying to do a sight-in process as well. Definitely leave any comments you have. You know, do you like this sight? Do you not like this sight? I know it's a pretty expensive sight at $600, but if you're using something like, you know, one of the upper end Spot Hog models or the Axel Landslide, they're pretty comparable in price. Definitely subscribe to the channel. I really appreciate it. You know, I do a bunch of different types of videos, you know, mountain biking, hiking, surfing, archery stuff. So last but not least, please subscribe to the channel. I really appreciate it. Every subscription helps me get out to more people as well. It helps that algorithm. And last but not least, click on one of the boxes in the corners. One will take you to my archery playlist, another to a favorite video, and you can click the logo in that corner, the Urban Outdoorsman SoCal logo, to subscribe. Thanks a lot.